Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Sheila, and I will be your moderator for tonight. I am also the co-coordinator of Families United with Vanessa Santana. If you can stand up. Hello. Woo! So I want to first welcome you to the Root Social Justice Center. The Root is a nonprofit organization growing a movement for racial justice. We provide programming, we rent out our space, and we prioritize communities of color and their leadership. Please check us out on the web at therootsjc.org to find out more, to get involved, and or to volunteer. I'd like to go over a few logistics before we get started in our meeting today. We have parking. We have parking from our building over and on this side and on the street. If you are parked on vines in the residential area, please move your vehicle now. We have bathrooms. We have one bathroom behind us here, depending on what side you're sitting on, your left, I believe. And then we have another bathroom upstairs, out this door, upstairs, and through that door, and right on your left when you open up that door if that bathroom is occupied and you need to go to the bathroom. At the Root, we strive to be fragrance-free to make this place a more accessible place for people. We acknowledge that there might not be fragrance-free people here today. If somebody is bothered by your fragrance, then we're going to ask you to either try to wipe it off or try to put yourself in a more aired area away from other people who might be sensitive to that chemical sensitivity. If you need more information about that, please check in with somebody. Would anybody from the Root like to be check-in about fragrance-free with that kind of thing? Okay, we'll figure that out. The exits, we have an exit over here and we have an exit over here. This is an accessible exit and this one has a few stairs. And that's the logistics for everybody. We want to thank Esler for doing filming and videotaping, and Kip for filming and videotaping, so let's give them some snaps. We want to, Janet, right, and Christine. We want to thank the ASL interpreter so we can make it accessible to people who are deaf and hard of hearing. Let's give them some snaps. Or listen for the deaf community. Thank you. And Kip and Ezra will be filming for BCTV, which is Brattleboro Community Television, and also for the Root Feeder, which is our Root multimedia project that we have here. We have Childcare being supplied off-site, hosted by the Kids Place, and provided by Rio, Z, Fee, Emily, and Emily. And we want to give them some snaps. Yeah. And then we have Angela, if you can just stand or raise your hand. Angela will be taking meticulous notes for us. She will be recording your questions and any quotes and anything that comes out, so we can put this either into a report or give it to the commissioner to be able to follow up. So please, if you have questions, know that they will be given to the commissioner and know that they will be recorded and that we will not leave you out. And Angela's the one who will be recording tonight's meeting. Let's see. Great. So today we have the Vermont Commissioner of DCF, Ken Schatz, here. Yes. And with him is Deputy Commissioner of DCF, Karen Shea. Being transparent, I want to say thank you for traveling so far. Thank you for showing up to hear our stories. I have a relationship with Ken on a different board that I sit on, and I hope that it's that relationship that helps you to be here tonight, and hope that relationship keeps you involved with our families as well. So thank you, Karen, and thank you, Ken, for being here today. Great, so a little bit more. Today marks our 1-year anniversary of Families United. So not only are we celebrating, but we're celebrating with a wonderful cake, so that's what our cake is about. So we'll be doing maybe a ceremonial cutting afterwards. And today we are really celebrating the relationships we've built among each other, that strong network of families coming together. We are celebrating the healing that we've been able to do together, And we're celebrating the courage that we have to continue to stand up, to have our voices heard, and to hold DCF accountable to its families and to its communities. So that's what we're here today. So just a little bit about Families United. Families United started over a decade of myself being an advocate for families who were being impacted by DCF. I've represented dozens and dozens of families over the years as an advocate and was continuously being troubled with the treatment of families by DCF staff. There was no strength-based practices or trauma-informed or cultural competent practices, not to mention sometimes being mean and demeaning. Some of the policies created and upheld by DCF created more harm than good for many of our families. The violations of families' rights, such as confidentiality, conflict of interest, or even things such as people with disabilities or people in recovery or indigenous people were falling through the cracks and being either mistreated or discriminated against within the system, just to name a few. The practices of DCF not aligning with what they say their mission is, to reunify families, the lies, the trauma, and the vicious cycle that many of us in this room know way too personally. My experience didn't end there, though. I myself endured name-calling, inappropriate and discriminatory language and actions towards me as an advocate for these families. I just recently was told by a DCF worker that they didn't want me to be in their meetings because I was being aggressive for asking questions. Or saying things like to me too, well, you're able to dress nice, you're able to have a place to live. As a person who is in that position as an advocate, I could only imagine that if I, as a professional in those situations, were being treated like that, how were the families being treated like that when I wasn't there? I was astonished by this treatment I was receiving as another professional in my community, and I talked to other folks who worked in the community, and some with DCF. I talked to lawyers, we talked to guardian ad litems, pastors, counselors, caseworkers, family time coaches, daycare providers, bosses, business owners, and even foster parents, and even former foster kids. All of which agreed that the system of DCF is not working well and is tearing apart our families and communities in a way that is not necessary. For over a decade, I had heard the stories of impacted families and watched what would happen. My longest case I worked on was for 6 years. We never gave up fighting for that child, never. And they turned 18 before they were able to reunite with their mother. I told myself that I would never wanted to do that again. I never wanted to see families go through what I saw these families go through, and I wanted the system to change. Families United is a program of the Root and was created by Vanessa Santana, Heidi Parent, and Melody Hudson, and myself, and I'd like the three of you to please stand up. Families United is a peer support group for families impacted by DCF and want to make a change in DCF, family, court, and legislative systems relating to families. We meet the first, second, and third Wednesdays of the month from 6 to 8 p.m. here at the Root. We have a potluck, and we provide childcare on site. Pause. So, our goals for tonight of this meeting, we're hoping that this meeting can be coined as a listening session. We hope that this meeting will be the first listening session as a pilot, and we hope that the DCF commissioner will go around the state to have listening sessions with other families impacted by DCF and create an actual report from these listening sessions that we can use to make systemic change within the systems named before. We hope that this is an opportunity to specifically build relationships with all of you, but specifically to build relationships with you, Ken, and you, Karen, and to have authentic relationships with the DCF office, staff, and people who are making those decisions. We hope that we can share our experiences without retaliation and receive compassion and understanding. We hope that our goals are to have other impacted family members share their experiences. And we hope that another one of our goals is to have follow-ups with folks' questions from this meeting. And lastly, we hope that one of our goals will be to have a follow-up of next steps with the commissioner, with this group, Families United, to see so we can get down to work and actually do some work to make some change. So those are our goals for tonight, and we hope to accomplish some of them, and we need all of your help to help make that happen. Okay. So I wanted to go over a little bit of what we're going to do tonight. Again, for those of you who can't see, we have an agenda here, and I put it up here so those of you who like those visuals have that. The agenda tonight is, we already did our mingling of food. We're in the welcoming part right now, and then we'll go into sharing our truths. Sharing our truths is we have a panel of impacted families here today. They are going to be sharing their stories under 5 minutes and giving you a little bit, just a little snippet, a teeny, and I mean like teeny snippet of what they've been through in their lives. And then we're going to have the commissioner and/or Karen speak for their part. There's a few questions that we've asked them to answer, specifically about what their role is, what type of decision-making do they have, and who they are. And then, and the reason why that part is short, just so people understand, is that, just to be transparent, Karen and I have spoke. They're aware of the agenda, and they know that this is a listening session. They know that this is an opportunity for us to be talking to them and for us to be sharing our stories. So we're asking them to spend the time listening for the majority of the meeting. Then we're going to open it up to community statements, stories, and questions. Again, I will be moderating that very hard and only allowing just a minute or maybe 2 for people to speak, because there are many people who want to speak tonight. And then we're going to do a closing, and then after we close, the commissioner and deputy will be here for a short amount of time after, so almost like it's paparazzi, run to them and get to them first, to be the first person to talk to them after the meeting ends, and you can finish up food and mingling and helping to clean up. We'll assume that if you're here after 8 o'clock that you're helping to finish cleaning up the space. So that is our agenda today. Great. So I wanted to go over some agreements. I want to first say that we reserve the right to ask anyone to leave this space if we feel like people are unsafe, period. If people act unsafe, we feel unsafe, and it's really causing a problem for people, we will ask you to leave. It's not up for debate. We also, as, and a root member will be making that decision. We also wanted to go over the agreements that our group usually goes on. You can see them over there, or maybe not, but I'll come over here a little bit. So our operating agreements in Families United is oppression exists. What that means is that we believe oppression exists. Racism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, all these isms. It is not up for debate in this space at all. It exists. We're not playing the vicious oppression cycle, and we're not pretending that these things do not exist, and we're not going to pretend that these issues do not impact these families here and impact you out there. The next agreement is, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. A lot of people like to say, wow, that story's outrageous. Wow, how could you say that? Psh, really? Come on. The reality is, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Let's remember that we all have our experiences, we all have our truths, and we all walk a different life in this world, and that just because we don't see it, again, does not mean it doesn't exist. Our next one is, we are all here for our collective liberation. We as a group have decided that this is a very vulnerable group, and these people right here have been pit against each other. Every single one of these people have been pit against each other. Oh, well, you're an alcoholic, or you got mental health, or you got these, or you got your kids taken away because of this. We're all pit against each other. Who's better? Who's deserving, right? We have made a commitment to each other as Families United that we must be united first before we can help unite other people. We will not be pit against each other. We are here for collective liberation. We will not be We are here to change the system. Part of what Families United does is we are a support group, but we're not just here to vent or to talk about our stories. We're here to make change and to do action. We're here to change the system that is impacting not just these families, but clearly all of you out here in the community. We all have something to give. We all have something to learn. We all have strengths in this room. We all have value. We all have something to offer. Every single one of these family members has stood up with a strength and has added their expertise, their skill, their voice to this group, which has made it wonderful. And we all know that we all have a room to grow and to learn from each other. Confidentiality in this space. So usually we will operate under confidentiality. Today, this is the one agreement that we're not doing. This is filmed by BCTV. So if you feel uncomfortable with being filmed, please let one of the filmmakers know. If they turn to you to be on camera, please let one of them know. We have agreed to be vulnerable. We have agreed to tell you our stories. We have agreed to share our trauma with you. Assume good intentions. We want to make sure that even though we have different relationships with different people, that we want to assume that people are operating from good intentions. And we want to build those relationships from that foundation. And the last, we operate from a trauma-informed approach. How many of you know what that means? Raise your hand. Great. I'm going to be asking you to hold that space. I'm going to be asking you that I hope you really know what trauma-informed means, and I'm going to be asking you to hold that space for you and for others in the room. We're going to be talking, every single one of these stories is traumatizing. Every single one. We're going to cry. We're going to fumble. We're going to not be able to speak maybe. We're going to pace. We're going to walk. We're going to stumble. There's going to be a lot of stuff that could happen right now. And I ask that you be patient. I ask that you have compassion. I ask that you understand the gift that these families are giving us by being so brave to share their stories. And I ask that you hold that space. I also want to bring something else into the space. That with that trauma, there are people in the audience who have caused people on this panel trauma. I want to acknowledge that. And I need, for those of you who are in the audience, that you know who you are, to please acknowledge that. This is not a complete safe space, unfortunately, for everybody in this room. And I, in our group, wants to try to make that as safe as possible. And we want to acknowledge that there are people in this room that people on the panel feel harmed by. And I need that to be in this space. That we're not all allies in this space. And we want to be, but right now we're not. So I really hope that we're able to build those relationships. I hope that we're able to be trauma-informed and to hold that space. And I hope that we're able to be real with each other of what the impact is and what's been going on in our communities. So we're going to start. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So we have a panel of wonderful families. Each of them have prepared something to share with you. And we're going to give them a few minutes to share. And then after each family person says, they're going to introduce themselves. And after each person talks, what I would like for the group to respond back, and we're going to practice it. Thank you for sharing your story. Everybody with me. Thank you for sharing your story. Say it again. Thank you for sharing your story. When people are done speaking, what do we say? Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you. So we're going to do first, and I think we're going to go, Allison. I think we're going to start with you. And again, people, please be patient and know that people may need support while telling their stories.
Hello and good evening. My name is Allison. I live in Brattleboro, Vermont, and am the mother to 2 boys. My birth son is 5 years old, and he is the most thoughtful, caring, and empathetic toddler his preschool has ever met. My stepson is almost 3 and shares those qualities and is very smart and outgoing for his age. Most of all, these boys have a heart of gold. My family consists of me, my son's father, and my son's grandmother, plus my husband. My family runs as a whole. Very supportive, great team raising my sons. They are blessed to have 2 very cooperative, co-parenting father figures who work diligently around the clock to love and to nurture my sons alongside me. I am an individual who has a documented medical disability, and I was in foster care as an adolescent. I have been impacted in many areas in my life by DCF, starting with my childhood experience, which then carried over to my son's life. I'm still being impacted due to being disabled and lower classed. Also, with the assumption of me being labeled as a high risk due to my previous foster care history. There are past accusations against me, but they were disproven with no findings. With no findings. I've had no closing letters given to me, and were informed they don't exist, even after those previous cases were closed. Shortly after trying to follow the process to have my stepson living with me, after proving my home was safe for my children to live in, they responded by opening a case on my birth son based on false accusations of substance abuse that were proven false with a clean UA. Every time I achieve my requests, more appear in their place, irrelevant to both the reports and my parenting skills. I strongly feel the guidelines on the risk assessment should be amended in a way that is more family-orientated. I feel it is wrong to assume I'm incapable as a parent because I was in the system. I feel I deserve the chance to live a happy and fulfilled life and the right to have a family. Instead of relying on a system based on statistics, everyone deserves to have an individual set plan based on the family's strengths and actual facts. Thank you for your time and consideration, Ken.
And we're going to have Chris, who's going to be our next.
I think it's all set.
Hello, Ken and everybody. Good evening. My name is Chris, and I have lived in Brattleboro since 2016. My son is currently in a foster care home. Me and my wife, stepson, and the family, we all share a strong bond with my son, and I speak tonight in hopes of reunification. I have been affected by DCF Family Services Division since shortly after my son's first birthday. I was at the store, and my girlfriend at the time called saying that they were there to retrieve him. Afterwards, I went down and got to say goodbye as they were putting him in the car. Afterwards, they tried to deny my parentage as a father, which was eventually approved by a judge in court. And then since then, I have been struggling with this list. I have done my parenting classes, my mental health and substance abuse evaluations, everything that I'm supposed to do. And yet they're still saying that there's more to be done. I don't understand what that has to really do with my parenting skills. It has been a long struggle going out of town for my visits when I live in Brattleboro, and it has gone on for almost a year straight. I've just recently been granted home visits about 3 weeks ago, and they're going very well. The kids are very, very strong bonded. We all love each other. We work hard just to take care of everything, and we always make it through. I believe I deserve to have him home. I think it's necessary for the department to be changed as a whole based on the accuracy and solid proof of accusations instead of hearsay and assumptions. I'm lost. All right. I stand for my parental rights. I love my son and my family, and I do believe that reunification is definitely strongly possible. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope we can change this system.
Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we're going to have Heidi. Heidi's going to share their story next.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Heidi. I am a mother of 3 children and a grandparent of 7 children with 1 on the way. I am a person with a documented medical disability. Currently, one of my son's children resides with them and has a baby on the way. My other son has a daughter who lives with their mother and a daughter who lives with him and his partner. My other 4 grandchildren have unfortunately been taken away from us and put into foster care and possibly adopted. Since the day my grandchildren were born, I have always been a part of their lives. Before going into custody, we all were like peas in a pod. Getting to see my grandchildren almost every day created a bond between us that seemed unbreakable. We would go to the park and play games. We would be in the outdoors, gardening, swimming, taking care of the land, taking care of the animals. We would love to dance and play Ring Around the Rosies and sing. We would practice our words and alphabets and have fun. We would go shopping and pick out cool educational toys and play memory. We would make meals together and teach the kids how to cook and clean. And we would do a big group huddle and read books until they fell asleep. After my grandchildren being taken into custody, I spent the next 1.5 to 2 years having supervised visits at DCF with the grandchildren through my daughter's regular visits. Then one day in 2013, visits stopped immediately without notice, and I was not allowed to see my 3 oldest grandchildren. After this happened, I would see one of my grandchildren on the streets at their daycare, and my grandchild yelling my name. The DCF put me in the position to have to ignore a toddler, my own grandkid, who grew up with me and has a special bond with me, in fear of me never being able to see her again. My grandchild wanted to reach out to me, and the response she got looked like I didn't care about her, because I was told that if I have contact, I may never see them again. When the fourth child of my daughter was taken into custody, I immediately asked to be a part of the case and be considered for placement as I did with the other children, instead of keeping the bond that my granddaughter and I had. DCF chose to also deny contact with this grandchild, taking away visits and using my medical disability of having seizures as a means to keep me from my grandchildren, and ultimately deny me access to the buildings, stipulating that I would be arrested if I showed up at the visit with my grandchild again. I feel like my grandchildren may think they have been abandoned, especially after these experiences. Really, both their mother and I have been working to bring them home, or to at least be a part of their lives if they are not able to come home full time. I feel like DCF has discriminated me due to my disability and has used my medical condition to prevent me from having a relationship with my grandchildren, despite my medical provider stating that I am fit and safe to care for children. I have a partner and my own home with children in my neighborhood. I am also currently one of the main providers for my 15-month-old grandchild 3 days a week while their parents work. I have also provided both the physical and emotional safety for my grandchildren and believe in families being together and supporting each other with unconditional love. I believe that DCF did not uphold their own mission of reunifying families. They did not keep the kinship placement or family's bond and connection. This type of policy or behavior by DCF adversely affects families and communities and has an everlasting impact of drama on the whole family, especially the children, who are often losing connection with who they are, and where they come from, and the love their families can give them. And thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you for sharing your story.
All right, I'm Dan. I had 4 beautiful young children. The reason I say I had is because I'm at the end of my fight. I lost, and I've been erased from my kids' lives for looking at about 2.5 years now. So this is a seriously summarized version of my fight because it covers close to a decade. The first time I had any involvement with DCF was because of my kids missing a day too many of school over the allotted amount. I was a single dad at the time due to their mother's instability and bouncing in and out of their lives. So I was having a little trouble juggling work, kids, and dealing with the side effects of the kids missing their mom. I thought it wasn't a big deal that DCF wanted to come to my house for a meeting because I knew I was a good parent. Well, I thought wrong. When they came over, I was told my apartment was filthy because of about 6 to 7 dishes left unwashed in the sink. They then told a judge late on a Friday night that I was having child molesters watch my kids while I was at work so they could storm in and violently yank my kids out of my house, when they knew their 17-year-old aunt was the one actually watching them. Come Monday, since they had lied, they couldn't explain to the judge why they had taken my kids, so he got pissed and ordered them to give them back immediately. But the trauma was already done.
I'm the one who had to deal with the nightmares for months afterwards. 3 to 4 years later, after a total of 8 years of being the one keeping everything together with no help, my stress levels got to the point that I started taking prescription pain pills to help it. It was It was supposed to be a temporary thing. But after a month, when I stopped taking them, I realized my body still desperately needed them. I had never dealt with real addiction myself before. So I didn't make the best decisions for the next 7 to 8 months of my life. I switched over to heroin, started stealing, and lost my job due to bad decisions. I definitely wasn't the best parent during that phase, and I knew it would catch up to me. I knew I would have to do some jail time when it did. But I never knew it would cost me my kids. I would have smartened up a lot quicker if I had. Minutes after I was pulled over and taken in for a warrant, DCF was there to take them. They had a legitimate reason this time. I had no issue with that. What I had a problem with is how they conducted themselves during the time they had my kids. I never got a sense of caring for the well-being of the kids from them. It always seemed like a contest, a win-or-lose contest. Not once did they ever sincerely talk about reunification as a goal. It was always them trying to get me to admit to something I knew wasn't true, and telling me my kids never wanted to see me again, that they were afraid of me, etc. Stuff that we both knew my kids would never say. They saw me with my kids several times during visits and knew my kids loved me and missed me and wanted so badly to go home to Daddy. I had turned myself around more than anyone else in that situation. I know because everyone involved except DCF told me that constantly. Even at the trial, I had everyone on my side, even the guardian ad litems. Everyone except the DCF worker and their lawyer. My kids were polite, well-mannered, and extremely smart because I raised them that way in those 8 years before I made a mistake. So how does 8 months cancel out 8 years? And why are they now broken up into 2 different homes with 2 different last names, living with entire strangers when everyone knows they belong with me? My oldest is 14 now and wants to come home, but the adoptive parents are more concerned with trying to brainwash them against me than what she actually wants. That's it.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Hi, Vanessa Sanchez. I've been in Brattleboro since 1986. And I just want to give you a little bit of me knowing about DCF. I had my niece and my nephew in the 90s. And back then, in those days, the social workers were all about the best interest for the child. And they were so different than nowadays. Now I have my granddaughter that's been in DCF custody. And the school had made reports of her being in harm's way, and they can't even get through intake with DCF because they feel it's no concern, which we feel there's very concern if the school is a Mandel reporter, and especially if it's the principal making some kind of statement saying that my grandchild is not safe, and nobody's doing anything about it. And I feel in my heart that this is just not okay of what DCF is doing in Brattleboro. It's supposed to be for the best interest of the child. She gets left on the school bus. Her mother's not there to pick her up. They call my son. We run to go pick her up. She's frightened and scared that her mom's not there to grab her or pick her up. She missed so many days of school. The principal put that in notes too, and DCF isn't doing anything for her. They feel it's not a bad threat, which I feel it's a bad threat for a 5-year-old child that is not really mentally 5. She's really 3. And imagine as your mom not picking you up off the bus, and they have to locate me or her father to pick her up and drive around the bus driver to find a place for her, which I feel if it was my son and the other way around, DCF would have stepped in quick and took her. And how come they're not doing their job of checking up on the mother after they placed her back in her home, which she was the one that was charged with neglect? So I don't understand all this stuff, and I've been here for 3 decades, and I don't understand how can they not do anything, because they're the one that placed her back in the home with the mother. And she doesn't go to school. She missed so much school, she's staying back in kindergarten. That's really, I don't understand it. My son, the whole year with my son, she missed 2 days from being sick the whole year. She's with the mother, it's been more than 15 days and more tardies than ever. And my son has to leave his new job to find out why that's not in school. And we're banging on her door. He's trying to figure it out. He's going to the school saying something, and she doesn't answer the door. And then the other time, she did answer the door, and he requested that he comes in to see his child. He wants to see if she's okay, and the mother would not let him in. And that's where my heart is to my family, because I don't understand why DCF isn't doing anything, and they're the one that placed her back in that home. How could you leave a child on a school bus? Not 3 times, not 5 times. It was way more leaving her on the bus. And the bus driver has to locate us and find the other family members to get her every time, or she's not at school. They don't call her family because they're not there. They call my son's family, me and him and my daughters. And we have a lot going on in our family already. My daughter just had twins, and my other daughter has twins. So, you know, we're going through a lot. Where is her family? Where is her net of support? And if it's not there, why don't they give my son that chance to show that he is the most responsible parent in that his only child's life, that's the only child he has. And I don't think it's fair that the school, if the school is a Mando reporter, why aren't they doing anything? We just had to call Friday and nobody did anything, or it saved my granddaughter. She's slurring at the door. He banged for a half an hour. She won't get up because she's not in her right state of mind, and nobody's doing anything about it. So I'm really requesting that they stand up and get my son the help and my granddaughter the help that they need, because it's not fair for a child to be left and just nobody cares, and we have to run around and find her. Something should be done. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Melanie Hudson. We have 4 beautiful girls. Our oldest daughter lives in Bennington, Vermont, in a group home for girls. And my 3 youngest children all live in separate foster homes in the Windham County area. I am a person in recovery and have had 5 years of sobriety now. Me and my family moved to Vermont 6 years ago after my mother had passed away. In November of 2015, I had a severe temperature that turned into the flu for over 3 weeks. I was very sick in my home and needed support during this time for me and my children. I reached out to my children's school to inform them and ask them for help. Even my kids talked about how sick I was. I wanted to make sure that my children didn't get sick as well and that they were able to get to school on time. Before my children were taken away, we were very close. They were full of life, the siblings always helping each other. They were good students. They loved going for walks with me, playing in the park, and I was teaching them how to cook. We loved to read together and learn new things. We loved going out to eat and going to community events. We went to church weekly and were building a relationship of faith in God and our church community. My children were learning about Jesus and the Holy Spirit. At my home, they were free to be themselves, loved each other, their dog and cat too. Me and my husband were temporarily separated at the time I got sick. DCF and the school went to great lengths to prove that the children were in danger, even to say that they believed I was using again and I wasn't really sick. They also used money as a reason why we couldn't take care of them or provide for them the way they felt was needed. Saying things like, now your children can go on real vacations. I had no prior incidences with my kids of abuse, malnutrition, accidents, or anything. Yet they removed my 4 kids 4 weeks later from my home during Christmas time. Since my kids were taken into custody, DCF has only allowed me to have sparse input. DCF has controlled the narrative for me and my family. I had visits set up for me at first twice a week. It went okay for a short time. Then on different occasions, I was waiting at my regular visits at the library, then another at the pizza place, and another time at the Boys and Girls Club. And they canceled each of these visits again and again. And it was reported to me that all 3 of my children never wanted to see me again. They just left me sitting there. I only saw one of my children one last time later and have not been able to have contact at all with any of my 3 youngest children since 2016, beginning of 2016, including not being able to give them letters or cards or anything. After only 3 or 4 months went by, DCF suggested adoption. Can you hold that, please? For my 3 girls. Since then, I have been shut out, shunned, no trespass orders, and have had severe abuse from the system, and made to ignore my children if I do see them in public. My oldest child attends a boarding school in Bennington and has been requesting to come home for over a year, or at least to see us for over a year. And DCF has denied this request. However, I have finally been given permission to have communication with her, and we do visit her now in Bennington. Thank you. And we're going to her graduation, the end of June. Okay. My 3 younger children are separated from each other and don't all have stable permanent homes. I believe DCF chooses to focus on the weaknesses of families and uses these weaknesses as a weapon for severe punishment. All families need support. All families have strengths, including mine. I hope that DCF can see my strengths, our strengths, and the strengths of other families, and to use our strengths to support how we can grow and learn as families and community moving forward. Can DCF commit to using strength-based approaches in their system? Thank you for listening to my story.
I could probably do a little. I wouldn't do my right one. My name is Craig. I pretty much am the father of those children. Yeah, it seems the better you do, the more tasks that they add. And up until recently, I wasn't able to see my daughter, but I did see her up until a certain point. Then a chain of events happened. Like we were talking to them, they wanted to adopt them out right away, but the foster parent family that we had, we were friends with for 10 years, and we maintained our relationship with these people for over 10 years. We were possibly guardianship, but the gentleman, well, unbeknownst to any of us, was diagnosed with cancer and went downhill real fast. Their idea was, okay, we're going to stop contact here so she can adjust. Well, she got to watch this gentleman after knowing him for 10 years, going on vacation to Florida and stuff, pass away, and her parents weren't there, so she reacted to that way, and that's why she's in the boarding school. But, it's just, I just recently got to see her again, so I'm finding out why she had these behaviors. But it was, the kids were really good, and they all got along, and we all worked together, and they wouldn't tell me that, she needed a little bit more help, so I ended up working and taking care of, trying to support my family the best way I could, mailing money back or whatever to Melanie and the kids. But nothing was ever good enough, so, now it's just, the system's okay, but it has some flaws. Like, what she didn't mention is that she passed a clean drug screen, had a temperature of 103.3, and she was brought there by DCF people, so it was all legit, and they still maintain it was drugs, or whatever, but this test says differently in the presence of DCF workers. There is no positive drug screen for it, so, I don't understand that at all. They still took my kids anyways, but, man, it's still to this day, they're still trying to use it somehow. I wish they'd just update their paperwork, but that's okay. Well, with that, I guess I'm gonna pass the mic. Yeah. What? As a father, yeah. Yeah. Well,
How do you feel as a father?
how I feel as a father, I feel that, my rights haven't been taken into consideration, I'm with the biological mother. I'm not fighting with her, but I see that my kids are isolated. They said to process some sort of a trauma. Well, all of a sudden, my kids don't want to see me after right along. Come running up to daddy, to canceled over email. I never got to, the kids never said nothing. And it's just, I feel like, they isolated, they put this in. And then I know my daughter that wants to come home, and this guy comes up, he goes, well, what about this? What about that? She's like, the fear of the unknown. She'll be 15. She's like, do I have to wait till I'm 16 to come home? It's like that. My house is passed. I have the income. I have everything I need. My service plan is complete, 100%. And it has, it's, we own our own home. We have all that. It's not that we don't have, the job, the income, the everything. And the service plan, according to them, is complete. So I don't understand why this goal keeps going and going and going. When they have no placement for a couple of them. Or they need placement for some, they don't have the stability that they say they do. When you go into court, it's totally different. You hear different out of the person's mouth they said they did. But, so I kind of feel like the system is, I can understand their point, but in some places, the pendulum's gone all the way with what happened in Parnell, but that was a different case. That's an individual case that, they, unfortunately, that's what happened. I can only imagine how Willis must feel, but it's all right. All right, well, with that, I'm going to pass.
Thank you for sharing your story. Okay. So last but not least, Vanessa.
All right. Good evening. My name is Vanessa. I am co-coordinator of Families United. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. I have been impacted by DCF in many areas of my life. I was impacted at the early age of 12. I suffered from a lot of trauma due to mental and physical abuse before going into DCF custody. After going into custody, I felt really unwanted and really out of place. I was bounced around from a lot of foster homes. I was ignored, and they paid very little attention to me. The trauma I suffered and the changes I was experiencing at that particular time in my life were really hard to deal with, especially alone. I had moments where I just wanted to feel accepted, which led me down a dark and lonely road. One thing I can say about trauma is that for years it was like replaying a movie with all the horrible events that occurred over and over again. I wish DCF and many people would stop ignoring this issue. Several years ago, my daughters were both placed in DCF custody. From what was supposed to be a 48-hour hearing, turned into 18 months in DCF custody. My daughters were close to being adopted. I couldn't live with the pain in my heart of losing them forever. I worked really hard and have regained full custody. I'm very blessed to have my daughters back home. I have lost something from this, though. I have lost 18 months of their childhood that I can never get back. When my daughters were born, I always knew that I wanted to give them a better life than I had growing up. I wanted them to know that they would always feel safe with me, that they can talk to me with whatever they were experiencing. I always do my best to be a nurturing mother. We do everything together, from long nature walks, exploring the outdoors, camping, sports, long days at the park. We would spend hours doing crafts together, gardening, and educational things together. My daughters are also involved in this community, from our local library to events in town. I always try to build healthy memories for my daughters than my own experience. When my daughters went into custody, I spent my first 18 months with 1-hour supervised visits. I remember the terror of me and my daughters, of them taking notes as I interacted with my daughters in a small spaced room, then putting them in a car only to have them screaming to the top of their lungs because they wanted to be with me. I would tell them that they would be home soon. I was told not to tell them that because they would have acted a certain way later on. This for me would sound like the beginning of a horrible traumatic event for a toddler to experience, and yet no one seems to acknowledge this. I know that I was being judged many times because of my own history in the system. During this time, I did have a hard time coping with the loss of my daughters, keeping up with the case plan and all the paperwork I had to get. I turned to substance use, alcohol, and pain meds to escape. I feel like the system cornered me so that I can fail and hope that I would give up instead of working with me. I feel like they worked against me instead of getting me the help that I needed to regain custody. They didn't. I was left in the dark. After about a year in my daughters being in custody, I was told that they started thinking about the option of my daughters being adopted. My visits turned into bi-weekly visits. Several weeks after, I went into a treatment facility. I also was monitored every day, from doctor visits to therapy, drug tests, and overwhelming amounts of paperwork. Meanwhile, my visits started up again. My daughters had struggles in foster care with the way they were being treated. Many times they threw away some of the things that I had just got them. They said that the lady they lived with was mean. One time I told my daughter, "God's going to bring you home." My daughter told me, "Mom, Miss Bleep said, God's not bringing us home." That was so painful to hear from a 4-year-old girl. I'm grateful to say my daughters came back home with me shortly after that. I know that DCF discriminated against me due to my history in the system and because I have the disease of addiction. I know that my past doesn't have to define who I am today. I have learned from my past. The cycle doesn't always continue. Just because some people live in a certain lifestyle doesn't make us bad parents. We just slipped in the cracks of these created systems. I have worked with families in recovery for over 2 years. I have heard and seen similar stories just like mine. I've also heard stories worse than mine. Instead of reuniting families, they have been dividing us. I feel like they point out people's weaknesses rather than their strengths, leaving kids traumatized with no rehabilitation. This issue can go a long way, from fear, emotion, anxiety, depression, and addiction, only to repeat the cycle again. Trauma causes everlasting changes. I hope that DCF and people who work around the system can find a way to have a trauma-informed approach to help families, not tear them apart. The state of Vermont has the highest percentage of kids in DCF custody, at a 40% high. We know that caseloads have a big issue of why workers might be overworked and not performing their jobs properly. There is no excuse to how families have been treated. It's not right for a child to be haunted with the last memory of seeing his birth parents. The DCF system seems to have been created for families to fail rather than to be reunited. In closing, I just want to thank you all for attending, and in hopes that together we can find solutions for impacted families in this community and communities around the state of Vermont. Thank you.
Did we say thank you? Now we'll just say it to the whole panel. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Let's all just breathe in for a second. Breathe out. Thank you, each and every single one of you, for sharing your stories. Thank you. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for being an example for our community. Whew. So now, this is the part where we get to, according to our agenda, turn it over to the commissioner and deputy commissioner. And again, this is a time that he's just going to have a short period of time. He can give some reflections on what he heard, tell us a little bit about who you are, and we're really, a lot of us are interested in the room is about power making and decision making, and so there's been some questions before. Who's your boss? And what power do you really hold? And what decisions do you really make? And so we're hoping that you can answer some of those, and feel free to either stand up or sit however you want, but if you could come up here, and you can bring an extra chair if you'd like to come up as well. There you go.
Thank you, Sheila. I think I'm going to sit too. So again, my name is Ken Schatz. I want to start by thanking you for inviting me here today. I do, and I want to also thank all of you for telling your stories. I really do appreciate your courage. I could really hear the love you have for your children and your families, and I want you to know that's really evident and clear, and it is compelling. The reality is, so maybe I'm going to stand a little bit so I can see everybody. I apologize. So, child's protection is an incredibly important part of our community value. And I heard that in some of your comments, and I really appreciate that. One of the things that I have as a takeaway is the sense that I have that there's more agreement than disagreement. That is, we believe in strength-based approach. We believe in supporting families in addition to protecting children. We believe in trying to approach things from a trauma-informed approach. I really appreciated hearing your stories and your challenges about recovery. We want to support that. Interestingly enough, we also agree that the system can be improved. We may have disagreements along the way, to be clear and straightforward about that, but the reality is that we know that this is really a challenging issue. We appreciate the fact that families are incredibly important. We start from the premise that we want to support families being able to stay together, and if it is necessary to separate the child because of abuse or neglect, or because the value of child protection makes that important, we do want to try to reunify families. And I heard some of that through your stories. I appreciate the fact that these are really difficult situations, that there's levels of disagreement with respect to the individual circumstances. My commitment is to do our best to be fair and respectful in that process. I am really proud of our staff that worked really hard to implement our policies and laws. The reality is we do constantly review those laws and policies to try to improve them, to try to make them better, to learn about trauma-informed practices, to learn about best practices, and try to implement them. Someone made the point about the workload of our staff, and I have to tell you, that's my responsibility, and I agree with the person who said it, that our staff have workloads that are far too high. They can't do as well as I want them to do, they want to do. They really do need more support in order to handle the challenges that we give to them as a community. So again, I think there's a lot of agreement about things we want to address, even though on a daily basis and an individual basis, we do need to recognize that there's going to be levels of disagreement, which is why it is important to have a fair process, a fair system. And I think that, that was my brief introductory statement, but I want to tell you a little bit about me, because you shared your story. So my wife and I live in South Burlington. We have 2 children. Both of them have moved away, which is both hard and respectful. One lives in Brooklyn, one lives in Oakland. Good place to visit, to be sure, but they're far away. So I miss them. but that's kind of my life in part. I became commissioner about something close to 4 years ago, and Sheila actually asked me a question, why did I ask to become commissioner? And I have to tell you, I didn't ask to become commissioner. I was asked, and I had a history and a career involved in public service in different ways, and some knowledge about DCF through some prior roles that I have, because I used to be a lawyer representing children in the system. So I had some knowledge from that perspective. I took on this role because I do believe in the mission of the Department for Children and Families in terms of protecting children and supporting families, and hope that I can help stabilize our system and help to support those people who are working hard to improve both internally within our staff, but also in the community, because there are a lot of people who do a lot of work both in terms of advocacy but also providing services. And we're all part of a network. I mean, I do actually think of us as something of an ecosystem, in that one part actually does affect another, so that we need to be mindful that as we have challenging workloads, that impacts on other providers who have challenging workloads. We have a court system that is there to be fair and does have systems in place to make sure that children and parents have appropriate representation in that very rigid process, to be fair and to be clear. But that system's overloaded too. That system doesn't have the time to deal with cases, and some part of the stories that I heard that I reflected upon was some of the delays that are part of the court system process, which are really upsetting and challenging, that things take far too long to be decided. And so I do want to be clear that I did appreciate listening. I want to own the fact that I make decisions and I make mistakes. I try my best to make good decisions, but I don't always. So I'm not shy. I'm not thin-skinned. I appreciated listening to your stories. I really appreciate how respectful you were. And again, I hear the love that you have. You're coming from a place of strength in terms of your family lives, and I really do appreciate that. The question that she'll also ask, well, who's my boss? And the reality is in simple terms, it's the governor. I'm appointed by the governor, so every time there is an election and there's a governor elected, he or she can choose who should be their commissioner of the Department for Children and Families. I was appointed initially by Governor Shumlin, and then I was reappointed by Governor Scott. Who knows what the future will hold? But that's the technical answer. But I want to be clear. I feel accountable, and I think Sheila actually said this at the beginning. I am accountable to the children and families of the people of Vermont. Ultimately, that's our mission is to protect and support them. But I also, as part of this ecosystem, there's an incredible array of other people involved. I'm responsible and accountable to my staff, and I've already owned the fact that I don't do as well as I wish I could. I do my best to support them, but I know I need to keep doing more. There's lawyers in the system, there's community providers in the system, there are judges in the system, very specifically judges who review recommendations that we make. So we actually, interestingly enough, don't have a whole lot of, and again, the question was posed, what's our authority? I can't make decisions, for example, about removal of a child. That decision, I make a recommendation, the state's attorney reviews that, the judge ultimately makes that decision. I'm also accountable on a systemic matter. Oh, go ahead. If you have a question for me, I'm glad to try to respond. Thank you. I just want to be respectful of you and your process. But I think the point I think I was making was I'm also accountable to the legislators of the state of Vermont, elected officials who look at what we do as a department. They review laws, they change laws, they hold us accountable. They also pass our budget. And they have actually been very active. We have worked with them over the past 4 years to look at our laws, to improve them, and we have had, I think, a very positive interaction with the legislature in doing so, meaning, from my perspective, we've made some improvements. We don't always agree, again, but we've made some significant improvements. The legislature has a significant role in ongoing oversight of our actions as a department. And so The other thing that I guess I wanted to at least mention, just to be clear with you, is that the Department for Children and Families is actually more than the child welfare system, so you know sort of the lay of the land. We also deal with public assistance programs, Reach Up, Three Squares, LIHEAP. We deal with the childcare system. It's our responsibility to try to do our best to minimize the gap and the challenges with respect to finding accessible childcare in our state, which is also a very significant challenge and causes, I know, a significant amount of stress for families. We also deal with the homeless population. It's also our responsibility to provide emergency housing for people who are homeless. And so the ultimate issue is that we look at ourselves as having this really significant role, but it's within this context of working with others. And I think that from my perspective, it's also helpful to have an opportunity like this to listen to community members. I really, again, going to close with appreciating the fact that you did have the courage and the ability to tell your stories in a meaningful way. I mean, I think that it's important as we're always trying to improve. But also, I want to be straightforward. The role that we have in terms of protecting children does mean I'm not going to win any popularity contests. I appreciate that, and I'm going to do my best to be fair and respectful, but I do have to make some hard decisions. And I know not everybody will like them all the time, but the commitment I have is to do the best I can to be fair and respectful as we make those decisions, and to support you as family members and also my staff to make sure that we're mindful of safety for everybody. And again, I'm going to close with that. I appreciated Sheila opening with that. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Karen in case you have more to add. Thank you, Sharon.
Good evening. I'm Karen Shea. I'm Karen Shea. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Family Services, and I first want to start out by saying thank you so much for your bravery and your willingness to stand or to sit and tell us who you are and your experiences. I think it was very impactful, and I just want to say how much I appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and talk to us tonight. I'll start with who I am. I've been the Deputy Commissioner for Family Services for 2 years, but I've worked for DCF Family Services for 18 years. I started as a social worker in our Burlington District office, and I think a lot about my experiences as a social worker now, 18 years later, and then I think about what I want for our system, both for the workforce that I'm responsible for, but also for the people in the communities that we impact. And what I want for my staff and for all of you is for you to have an opportunity to have relationships. Because what I heard tonight is that, we don't always agree on what the right course of action is. Different people have different thresholds and comfort levels for risk. I actually heard in this panel, at the same time we're talking about not wanting to overly intrusive in the lives of children and families. We're also concerned about kids and sometimes want the system to be activated. So finding that right place is really tricky. And I think it's something that we dialogue about within our system and also with our legislative partners and our community partners all the time. What is the role of a child protection system? When should we be activated to intervene? And what should that look like? And fundamentally for me, what makes it all work is when an individual person in a role of a DCF worker has the opportunity to get to know a family on a personal level, to understand who they are, where they're coming from, what matters to them, and to do that individualized assessment, and also to be able to create a unique and individualized plan with that family in a way that they can have the time and the space necessary to explain to you the rationale and the thinking behind the decisions. As you were talking, my brain, I had to actually actively talk to it and say, stop trying to explain this in your own head. Stop figuring out where that thing in policy lives, and instead listen. But as I'm sitting there thinking about that, I'm like, maybe some of the experiences you had the workers in our system had the time and space to explain those things differently. You might make different meaning of the activities or the behaviors of the staff. And so that's something that I struggle with every day, is that I want you to have the best experience with our system possible, and that I also recognize that that only comes about when people have the time and space necessary to get to know people on an individual level and to explain things in an individualized way. And I also know that people in a system, our system, they need to be able to make decisions that they must make, as Ken said. And in the business of child protection, there's very little margin for error. And when something bad happens and people become activated and angry at a system, what it does is it creates a lot of fear on the part of our staff. And making decisions from a place of fear is not what we want. We want people to make a decision, again, from that place of relationship and understanding on a very human level. So I share that with you because in our system, I want to create an opportunity for our staff to, make mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. We are all human. But they need to be able to step back and look at those decisions in a way where they have the trust and faith that we've got their back and that we are going to support them in learning. Again, that takes time, it takes space. So, as Ken said, we are always looking at what is the needs of our workforce in order to really meet the needs of the families that we're here to serve. So I appreciate you sharing your experiences, because I know that we have a ways to go, and I want you to know that we all within the system come to work every day wanting to make your lives better. None of us come into this work because we want to do anything other than make things better in our communities. So I appreciate the opportunity to listen and take your stories with me and move forward in our work better because of your bravery. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh. You can tell they're professionals. They got it down in 15 minutes almost exactly. Good job. Thank you for being accountable to that time. I appreciate that. So, first of all, I want to make an announcement that we have index cards. Let me get those. Hold on. So we have index cards and pens. If you have a question, we would really like you to write it down on the index card, because for some reason we do not get to your question, again, we're going to be taking these, we're going to be documenting them, and they will be going to the commissioner. I am going to open up the floor, and the way this is going to be done is I'm going to prioritize impacted families and people that we've discussed from this group and being here today. I ask you to be civil and concise, and to ask what a question, have a comment, or a concern that you would like to put out. And again, if it's a short answer, then I might ask the commissioner to answer it. And if it's a longer answer, we may need to put it in the bank of him being able to really figure out how to answer that, okay? So I want to respect people. We're not blowing you off. We want to make sure that we have enough time. So what I would like to do is start taking stack in terms of people who would like to say something. Can you please raise your hand if you would like to say something? Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first turn, because we had a few extra minutes from the panel, I'm going to ask the panel members to ask their question, and then I'm going to turn to the audience.
Why does anyone who files a false report not get prosecuted?
Right. Who else has a question? Who was on the panel?
I was wondering, you said that they get to know the family. My son's daughter was in DCF. They never came to my house to do a home check. They never came to my house to see my son, guardian ad litem, or DCF workers. They never came and gave my son that opportunity to get custody of his daughter. And I don't understand that.
Right. Next.
I have a question of why you put a time frame on how long a parent has to get their children back, especially if they have strong beliefs in virtue in their family.
Great. Anybody else? Melanie?
I have a question as to why it seems like the less we need that you say you provide, the worse we are treated. The less we need. We rise above, and more demands, and, well, actually, our demands are over. I don't know, it's a confusing thing.
Great. And we're marking those notes. Okay. Now I want impact to families. I'm gonna go to you first, and then to you, and then to you. If you would like, please state your name.
My name is Brandy Vilkauskas, and
And if you could speak up because the mic is not to actually project.
my name's Brandy Vilkauskas, and I've recently been extremely impacted by. Well, actually, you have custody of my children. You, as the commissioner of DCF, have custody of my children. Who determines why and when children be taken out of their home, and how can that person decide this on being with the family only 10 minutes in one day, not even 10 minutes? And how can they base their argument on no facts? It's circumstantial. And what are the contributing factors that determine why the children be taken out of the home? And why aren't my children with their family? Especially after the judge rules it. Why isn't there a plan set in place weeks prior before taking a child out of their home? I mean, if you come into my home and then you leave, well, damn, you didn't find anything wrong. So then weeks after, you're gonna file because my doctor changed recommendations. I am a recovering addict. I am an addict. But that is no reason to take my children from me and split them up. They've been together since birth. Why should they be apart one day when they have family? I mean, there's so many other children that really desperately need a home. And my children that have numerous family members asking to take them are taking up these other homes. Why not free the homes by giving my children to my family so that it frees up other homes for children that are desperately really in need and being abused? My children not have one bruise on them, not have one thing wrong with them. When they got taken from us, we were just walking back to the playground from getting ice cream. How? And this is in no way to attack you at all. I'm sure you hear stories like this all the time, but this is not just about me. This runs deeper than me and my children. This is other people's families. And I had to look my 6-year-old son, he will be 6, in the eye today and say, baby, just stay strong. And he said, Mommy, I can't stay strong anymore. I just want to come home. And I said, I can't bring you home. And do you know what that does? That makes him lose faith in me and his father to protect him from people like this. Now they think that I can't protect them from strangers because somebody can just come in and take my children. And I'm going up over and beyond what we need to do. Right now, my husband's at a parenting class. That's why he couldn't be here tonight. They didn't tell him to. He wanted to. And I'm seeking help for my addiction because I wanted to. Not because someone told me to. If I didn't seek help for my addiction, I'd still have my children. Because for some reason, people that don't get help for their addiction can buy street drugs and keep their kids. Yet people who are getting help for their addiction get their kids taken away. How is that okay? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No sorries. No sorries in this room. No sorries. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. So did you want to say something?
Well, actually, she kind of did it when it comes to the fear, because no one wants to step forward. Okay, I'll do it.
Take 30 seconds.
Okay, no woman wants to step forward, no man, no woman wants to step forward and say that there's something wrong and they want to get help, because the moment they do, their kids do get taken away. And they don't go to a family member. They don't. I have a 4-bedroom house, and those kids could be right there. Right now, they could have been there on Thursday, and instead, they're separated, and I don't have a clue where they are. And DCF in Brattleboro is the one taking care of this, and I've been on it, calling, and all I get is the runaround. And and I don't know why. And if they're waiting from somebody from Florida, well, then get on the phone, get what you need, and don't stop on the phone until you get the answer that you need.
This isn't just about us.
Sorry.
It's about the children.
Yes.
Children. And
Children.
The children feel like they're being punished. The children are the ones who feel like they're being punished for this, because they have to be ripped out of their home, taken away from their mom and dad, taken away from their friends, taken away from their daily routine. So they're being punished for their mother wanting to get help. They're being punished.
So how many of you have had that experience in this room? Raise your hands. Thank you for sharing your story. You are not alone. Please stand up if you can, just so the camera and everybody can see you, please.
Thank you. My name is Laura Hill. I'm the mother-in-law of Allison, and Miller is my son. This whole thing that with the child being taken away, it was unnecessary. The mother made a rumor that the father wasn't the father of the child, and that we had kidnapped the child. Cops were there. It was humiliating. The child was asleep, but it just had a bath, a good meal, laying there going to sleep. Yanked out of a sound sleep, a little baby, in the middle of the night. Terrified. Every time now we see him, it took a long time. We had to fight tooth and nail to get rights, just to get our rights met. They should have been acknowledged when we first got the boy introduced to welfare and all that. You know, it should have been acknowledged then. Our rights should have been accepted to be treated like equal human beings, not like lowlifes, which is what they decide that. And the ones we've had in our home, most of the time treat us like we're garbage. And we didn't do a damn thing wrong. There's no drugs. They accused my son of being a heroin addict. He's got a weight problem. He's lucky. He don't gain the weight. I do. You know, it's crazy. They're rumors. I mean, it's like, what is this, high school? I thought rumors were done. I thought you had to base it on fact. And it should be based on fact, not rumors. We lost almost 3 years of this child's life because of a damn rumor. And yeah, I'm pissed. I'm beyond pissed. It's got to change, or nobody is going to get any better. And we're all afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better, because people are naturally afraid of change. It's got to be done, people. We all need to speak out against injustice. And this family, and any family that's going through this, has had an injustice done to them. Thank you.
Who else wants to speak? I'm going to call on you. Please state your name if you're willing.
My name is Jackie Reynolds, and I'm a former foster parent and member of the community. Thank you, Sheila, for allowing me to speak. This isn't a question, it is a statement. Although I would be, Mr. Schatz, delighted at any time to speak with you more in detail about this. Time or place of your choosing, I'll find a way to be there. I will be as quick as I can. So, I was a foster parent to a baby from the time he was 3 weeks of age until he turned 9 months. From the first day, my experience with DCF was atrocious. I felt my family was deceived, and I was told outright lies about the birth parents by the first caseworker. I then read the entire file, and it was wholly inconsistent with what I was hearing. I took it upon myself, with the advice of a trusted friend, to get to know the parents, and it turned out that they were wonderful. Despite my selfish desire to keep this baby and raise him as my own, I instead chose to support reunification. This is what good foster parenting looks like, both by nationwide best practices and by Vermont DCF's own policies and procedures. Thank you. However, I was discouraged in my efforts at every possible level. I followed the chain of complaints as instructed by the DCF website, and each time I would successfully reach a higher tier DCF employee, we had the same conversation. I voiced my concerns that the office was not in favor of reunification regardless of circumstance, and each time I was told the same things. And when I say the same things, I am being 100% literal. It was as if each DCF employee had received the same training, because they were not just giving me the same message, they were saying the same sentences. We can't give you a time frame because we just don't know. Those decisions are not made in this office. I will take your concerns to my supervisor. Nothing changed in any way after any of my conversations. I offered to elaborate in great detail to each and every person I spoke to, and not a single one ever took me up on this offer. During my time as a foster parent, I witnessed DCF violate dozens upon dozens of their own policies and procedures. Those are just a guideline, is what I was told. During my time as a foster parent, I witnessed DCF violate dozens of their own rules and regulations, which, as stated on their website, were based on actual laws. During my time as a foster parent, I did my own research about the case and found that DCF had failed to conduct a reasonable investigation into the charges against the parents, the definition I'm using for reasonable investigation taken directly from DCF rules and regulations. A while back, I was invited to a meeting with other foster parents and DCF staff members, which is intended to be a forum for grievances. This turned out to be a heavily managed situation that lacked a non-biased note-taker, so I requested to be sent a copy of the meeting minutes. We were assured that each of us would get a copy of these. When it was my turn to speak, I did not hold back. I stated, and shall repeat here, that the Brattleboro DCF office is broken, rather than an organization that upholds Rather than being an organization that upholds policies, procedures, rules, regulations, or a basic moral code of honesty, I believe that this office is a hostile work environment where one person, apparently beyond reproach, makes decisions, and those who disagree or fail to comply are insulted, belittled, and ultimately choose to leave their job. And the high turnover rate in this office is all the evidence that I feel that I need to make this claim. So when I received my meeting minutes, my words were summed up with these two sentences. 1, I disagreed with everything DCF said and did. And 2, DCF needs an ombudsman. Now it is possible, and probably likely, that at this point DCF had had enough of me and my complaints. And the fact that I am not only banned from fostering again, but not allowed to even provide respite care speaks loudly to this possibility. However, aside from casually ignoring my very detailed complaints, there is one glaring issue that I see with being quoted as I was. I absolutely said that there needed to be an impartial person who was not on the DCF payroll to field grievances and advise both parties on how best to proceed. However, I would never ever have said ombudsman. I said ombudsperson. The tone deafness of being misquoted in this way says volumes about the lack of regard and empathy that Brattleboro DCF has for the community that it serves. Today, that baby is a happy, healthy, vibrant 1.5-year-old living in a great home with wonderful parents who I am proud to call my friends. And I'm here tonight because more stories about DCF should end like this. and nobody should have to wage an all-out war for it to be so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please state your name if you're willing.
Hi, my name is Christy Schoolcraft. I have 3 beautiful children, 2 of which I am trying to get home. How is it DCF can keep my 8-year-old daughter away from me on visitations? I haven't seen her since April 11th. And now I'm only getting every other Sunday with her. And my husband is not allowed to be there because they opened a new investigation that has been investigated twice before. So how is it they can investigate something that they've already investigated twice before and didn't find anything wrong? I would like to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please raise your hands high. Please raise your hands high.
Hi, I'm Melissa Johnson. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug abuse counselor, private practice. I've had the opportunity to work with a few families and have made some observations. One is I've been asked to do several assessments regarding substance use. I was told, and this was within the last 2 years, I was told by one DCF worker very clearly that these were over allegations of pot smoking in a close neighborhood, and that if I determined that there was pot smoking, their recommendation, DCF's recommendation, is to advise the parents to keep it locked and to smoke outside. Another incident with another family, and this is prior to pre-legalization discussions in the state of Vermont, which throws everything funny. I was working with another woman who had her medical card, and she was still being told that she wasn't going to get her child back if she continued to use medicinal marijuana. And the guardian ad litem said in a meeting with DCF workers and therapists, well, if she's smoking pot, she's still hanging around the riffraff. Okay, so there's a lot of generalizations. I have a lot of concerns about some of the guardian ad litems. Some of them seem very much like they're working more for DCF than as an independent person. Thank you. This has been observed by many people. There's not a lot of training. I've been to trainings in New York about how guardian ad litems should be attorneys. Whole separate story about guardian ad litems. My second issue is when I'm asked to do an assessment or work with a client, and then there's a release signed, my assumption is that DCF wants to know everything. So again, it puts the client in a position of, if they're having a struggle staying away from their substance, what's going to motivate them to be honest with me so that I can help them? Because their fear would be, and this may have been addressed, I'm sorry I was late, I was with clients, their fear may be, if I tell her I had a relapse for 1 day, for 1 hour, she's going to tell DCF they're going to take my kids. But I need help. Correct, that's what you're sharing, is that, but I need help. So there has to be some respect, there has to be some understanding. If I'm working with DCF and helping clients with substance use, there's got to be some confidentiality that has to be able to be sacred. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to do Kit and then you.
Hello, my name's Kay Curtis, and I am currently working at the Brattleboro Retreat in the Welcoming Center, which is a childcare program for people who are in recovery from addiction. And so over the past year, since we created this program, I've dealt with 23 children whose parents are actively coming to the retreat every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning with their small children through the snow with strollers, living in complete poverty and that sort of situation, but they're coming every day because they care about their recovery, and they mostly care about their children. And I have been watching them and how much they care about their children, going, wow, was I such a caring parent when I took care of my children? Like, I am honored to be in their presence when they're with their children, because their degree of wanting their children's lives to be great surpasses anything I think I was capable of when I was a parent. So what I have observed is that they are less afraid of poverty. They are less afraid of walking through the snow with a stroller. They are less afraid of anything that's going to happen to them in their life than they are of you guys. And it happens over and over again. And it's like, this is the one thing that they're completely blown away by their fear of your taking their children. And it's happened. I have 5 children in your custody right now. 2 of them I understand. The mother went back into using drugs. I understood that you took those children. I was very happy you did. The other mother, I have no idea what you were thinking. I have no idea, and I have no idea what to tell the mother. So I'm just saying, the people who come and hang out with people who are trying to recover from being addicts, and some of these people are addicts because they fell down the stairs, they hurt their legs, and their doctors gave them pain meds. And now they're having their children taken away. I mean, I just think it's horribly, here's my question. Can we reframe the work that DCF does so that in a context, so that you occur for them more like a partner in recovery and not another obstacle to overcome? It's my experience that these parents that are doing the incredibly difficult work of recovering from addiction do not need another hurdle.
Thank you. We'll go you and then you. And then you.
More of a statement, I guess, or blanket question, really. My own terrible story, but I'm not here for that. I'm here supporting my stepdaughter. And my old lady, they've been on the phone since this whole thing went down every day. And the problem with that is eventually they get off the phone. And coming from a military family, that means that I have some answer as to how the government works. And normally I would, because in the military, it doesn't matter what sailor, soldier, or Marine screwed up, it's his boss's fault. You know, when they say it hits the fan, it will not be distributed evenly. It starts at the top. Thing is, we knaves understand that there are 2 branches of the government, legislative and the executive. Legislative makes the laws, and the executive enforces them. The thing I've been watching with these 2 all over the phone is either the left hand has no clue what the right hand's doing, or it's just straight up most of the time nobody's job. They keep passing the buck to dead-end phone numbers or somebody that's having a bad Monday. And the question ultimately keeps boiling down to who watches the watchers? I mean, yeah, you got the guys up there on the hill in the suits making the rules, but why is it they don't have to answer to the same guys we have to answer to? The dudes in the suits make the rules, the dude with the tin on their boob enforces them, but the guys with the ties seem invincible. When is there going to be some kind of uniformity?
Thank you. And then you.
I just want to take a pause for a second. There is a sign-in sheet that is available for you to sign, so please sign in and pass it around. Please sign it.
Hi, I'm David Blistein. I've been a guardian ad litem for 10 years. So I probably worked with about 200 kids. 200 kids. And as the people at DCF know, and Jackie knows, I've been a very strong advocate trying to change DCF. and I've worked on it a lot, okay? But there's one thing that concerns me, because I've sat here and I feel this side of the story has been told. In working with all those kids, and working with all those parents, I've heard many parents and many DCF workers and many guardian ad litems describe a situation. They never describe it the same, and none of them is ever completely accurate. So we have to remember that. Also, you asked that people here acknowledge that some of them have caused trauma. And I too often see with parents, we've all caused people trauma. We've all caused kids trauma. I too often see parents not owning the trauma that they've caused. So we've been talking a lot about the trauma we've caused grown-ups. But I'd like to start every discussion, because none of us is blameless. If you have addiction, you've caused kids trauma, just acknowledge it. That doesn't mean you can't be rehabbed. Doesn't mean you can't have your kids back. But to sit here and listen, as one of DCF's biggest critics, I've been on them for a year and they know it. They're sick of me. But the parents have to step up in their own hearts too. There are times that it's totally unfair. You're looking at it, but it's true. Okay? Needed to be said.
Hi, I'm Laura Dowling. I work at Early Education Services right up the street. For 20 years, I've been a family support specialist. Working with families, I've worked with hundreds of families in their homes every week, some families for up to 8 years at a time. I know some people in this room looking around, professionals and not. And first I'm going to say, yeah, there's legitimate cases where families need to be reported. I'm a mandated reporter, and I report when it has to be reported. But I've seen, because I've been there for 20 years, I've seen DCF in Brattleboro in this area, and I've been to hundreds of meetings over the years for families. And DCF used to be very parent-driven, very family-driven. Sorry, I have a lot to say. Family-driven, and we were one of the first people they would call. They'd be like, well, Laura or my coworker Leslie or whoever else, she's in there. I bet she has some idea what might be going on in this family. And they would call us. That we'd be like one of the first people as part of their investigation. Over the last few years, that has stopped. I don't even get phone calls. In fact, whole investigations will happen, cases are opened, and nobody has called the person who's been in these families' homes every week for months to years. And the people who are getting called are people who maybe don't know the family that well, or maybe are only one facet safe for someone with addiction. Maybe they're calling the retreat, and that's great. They should call the retreat, but they should be contacting the people who are working with these families. I've had legitimate cases where kids have been taken, where they should have been taken, but over the last few years, I have had families either lose their children or have open cases, and I have sat with families who I know are amazing parents, who love their children, and yes, maybe they had addiction, but I've worked with families who are in recovery, who have been recovered for years, as Jackie said, who are being punished for their pasts. And I have sat with families while they cried. And I have sat with family just recently who was so traumatized by an investigation, by a false report, that she begged me to call DCF and have her child taken because she couldn't take the pain from it anymore. And of course, I didn't do that. And I reminded her over and over that she is a really good mom. And I'd already been with her for 15 months at that point. And I helped calm her down. And I've listened to these guys, and I don't know all the background or anything, and everything that they're saying is what I've seen. People are not making up that they're being mistreated. And again, I'm going to say, yes, there's legitimate cases. But I have sat in court. I have been in court many, many times over the last 20 years. But in the last few years, I have been in court for several cases. And I'm proud to say that I was part of a case, and I know my testimony helped that child go home. And I have been grilled. I have been made to look incompetent. I have vast training. My coworkers and I have vast training in trauma-informed work, in child development, in parenting. And one thing that doesn't happen, and this is my question, I'm finally getting to it. One thing that I want to know, when DCF would be involved with one of my families, it was a bonus. Oh, you have somebody from Early Education Services in your home helping you. That is so great. That doesn't happen anymore. In fact, I don't get invited to meetings. I've been probably to 2 or 3 DCF meetings in the last 4 years. I used to be to 2 meetings in a month. And I remember being at every single meeting, around a table full of people helping. And I run parenting groups at night for the past 11 years that many people in this community have been to, whether they've been in my program or whether they're being told they have to take a class. And my classes used to be filled with DCF families. DCF would call me and say, or the family would say, DCF wants me to take this. I am no longer getting referrals to my classes, and this started after I testified in court and helped a family go home, get their child back. I've been told my classes aren't long enough, and so I'm going to try to make them longer, many more weeks in length. I have awesome feedback from families who have taken these classes. We have amazing feedback from home visits that we have done for families for years. We are a huge resource for families, and DCF should be calling us when they take children, or because we're happy to work with families even who don't have their kid. We can sit on a home visit with your DCF worker and help support you with parenting and child development. Okay. And there's also many other places in this community who are also not being used. There's wonderful, rich community of services here, CIS, visiting nurses, and we are amazing support for family. And I want to know why we're not being used, because working with us could help families be able to do better and get their kids home or keep their kids out of DCF. Yes. So that's my question.
Right. So there's a few. We only have literally a few minutes left.
So this is going to be a little difficult for me to share. I cry every time I talk about my children. This is my 4th child here. DCF has attempted to take him from me. Currently, my 3 children are in foster homes. I am trying to get them back. I am facing a TPR for all 3. I won against my court hearing to keep my infant home with me full time. I'm on conditions. I'm okay with that because he is home with me. I just want my 3 children home. Sorry. I was told that I had to go to marriage counseling to fix my marriage with my husband, and then DCF turned around and told me that I had to leave my husband in order to get my children. That is not fair. I have jumped through several hoops in order to get my children. I have done everything. I have done parenting classes. I have done visiting nurses. I have done everything above and beyond even before DCF has asked me to do it, because I love my children and I have never put them in harm's way. There has been supportive workers that were supposed to be there that I had trusted that had reported me against false accusations, and they were believed and trusted. My trust was broken. I cannot trust providers in the town of Brattleboro no longer. I do not trust people with my children, and it's very hard for me to trust people when they come home full time. There's certain people that have gained my trust and can keep that trust by providing me with that they're not going to attack me with my children. I just want to see DCF provide these services in order to reunite families like they're supposed to do. They say they're looking for the best interest of the children, but they do not. They're just destroying several families that do not need to be destroyed. And I have seen several people, and there's friends of mine that are in the same situation, and I do not like to see them hurt either. DCF has destroyed my family. I do not have my family there because they believe that I have harmed my children. I do not have friends anymore because they believe that I harmed my children. I did not harm my children, and I swear that I did not. I just want to see DCF help these families that have not harmed their children and give their children back to them. Thank you.
So we're going to have one last person speak, and then we're going to close out.
Hi, my name is Deb Whitkus, and I just have to say how blown away I am by your stories and the theme of addiction. Addiction was classified by the AMA in 1970 as a disease. Why are we still treating it as a moral issue, as an ethical issue? If we are using a public health model to help families who are sick, and they have relapse, which is part of the disease, we should actually be recovering and restoring families rather than separating and punitizing behavior that is typical of addiction. I feel like I also have witnessed, been to court and been involved in a lot of meetings. And as I'm sitting there with someone who has some expertise in prevention and has a fair amount of training in addiction medicine, my wish for you is that you set some standards, that you try to adopt a public health approach and stop the stigma and the punishment for addiction. It's ruining our families, and it's causing, not only is it harming these families, but if you've talked to anybody who's grown up in foster care, number one, their ACE scores go off the charts. You're creating a second generation that is really suffering. We need a two-generation approach. We need to look at these families, not children as individuals. How can we heal families? And I would have to say, from my experience from the recovery movement, their peer-based models are exceptional. If we truly want to heal, we actually have to do it with people, not for them. I would encourage you to check out the research on the outcomes related to peer-based approaches. There's a lot of evidence for mental health, and in the recovery communities. Healing families means having someone who's been there, who's walked in those shoes. That's the most powerful healing we can give to anybody. The other thing I just wanted to mention in terms of trauma-informed approaches, we need trauma-informed systems. Right now, there's a huge movement towards trauma-informed systems, trauma-informed approaches. If you look close enough at what Sam said, the 5 core concepts of Sam's trauma-informed approaches, what they talk about is transparency, reciprocity, mutuality, voice, choice. Hold on, there's one more here. I'm establishing safety. If DCF wants to change, I would encourage you to adopt policies based on these core principles, because then you will be inviting families who need to heal, who are hurting, and maybe they're hurt people who have hurt others. My mother hurt me and my sisters, and we were my sister's fingers were burnt on the stoves. If DCF had been around back then, we would have been yanked out. That didn't happen. It was a different time. My sisters and I, we all turned out okay in the end. But I will tell you something. If I didn't have my sisters and my brothers, I wouldn't be who I am today or where I am today, because they helped me to make sense of it all. We have a shared story, shared sense of meaning, making sense of it all. So I just, I would encourage you to seriously look into what does it really mean to be a informed system. That means sharing power, voices, choices, writing plans together. Go in before there's some kind of a crisis. All the people from EES, they know where families are struggling. Partner with them, please. And the parenting classes, I've been doing them for many, many years. They're okay, they're good. It's excellent to get some child development in there. But what's more important is to get someone teaching those classes who's been there, done that, who's overcome, to know what it's like to not hurt your kid, to have some other coping skill. That's where the power is, and I would encourage you to move towards that direction. Thank you. Oh.
Okay. Thank you. So I know that there are other people. Hopefully you can get to ask your questions to the commissioner or deputy after, but we're going to take this time to close now. And I want to say, closing, I want to first of all say thank you, Allison. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you to everybody in the audience who shared your questions, your concerns, your stories, your experiences. Thank you. Thank you, Ken,
for being here. Thank you, Karen, for being here. Thank you to everybody who supported this meeting and for us to be here today. In closing, we heard the theme, as Deb had said, around trauma and around addiction. And we also heard the theme around love and reunification. These families know that sometimes we need support in our lives. Raise your hand as a person and family. You don't even have to be a parent. Raise your hand if you've ever needed support in your life. Raise your hand. Right, everybody's raising their hand. So why are we criminalizing that? Why are we telling people that it's not okay? Why are we stigmatizing that? Why aren't we uniting our families? I so appreciate us being able to create this space here today because it's really important for people to hear the stories. And I know there's differences in the room, but the common theme that we have heard is that the system is broken. It is broken. And it's hard to admit that. And it's hard to be in a position of leadership in a system and in a world, frankly, that's broken. So, how many people here are willing to support the commissioner in unbreaking this system? How many people here? If you can stand up, both of you, and turn around and look. We are your best allies. These families are your best allies. We are not your enemy. We are absolutely here to support you in making the right decisions for our families, for our communities, and for our state. We are here to do the work. And there are hundreds of people who wanted to be here tonight. Hundreds of people who really wanted to be here tonight. Some are scared. Some are hiding. Some just physically can't get here. Some don't know. Some are dealing with too much trauma. There are so many reasons why there are not people here. So I want to remind us as we go out that when you see these faces in this community, that you continue to thank them for their stories. You continue to support their families. You continue to work that system in the way that brings justice to all of our community. Not just segments of our community. Not just to people who are white. Not just to people who are affluent. Not just to people who are able-bodied. Not just to people who wear suits and ties. That we are all in community together. And we are all working to advocate for our families to be united. So I thank all of you. And then the one last question that I'll leave off with is that we really hope that you will take this as a pilot of listening sessions across the state and to please put this into some type of report so that people can understand the experiences of this system. These stories are not up to debate. We understand that people disagree on circumstances and this and that, but you cannot debate the common theme of these stories. You can't debate the professional people in the audience who have stood up in those roles and said, the system is broken. We did not just have families say that. We had counselors, daycare providers, foster parents, community members, all echo the same thing. This is not an us and them. It is all of us together. Families United, thank you for being here tonight.